Alright, we're going to take a look at some angle relationships. First thing we're going to look at is what we call adjacent angles. Now, adjacent angles are coplanar angles that have common vertex. They also have one common side, but no common interior points. So you'll notice here I've got an example down at the bottom. What we're looking for are adjacent angles. Now, by definition, the angles have to have a common vertex and one common side. So, first angle I'm looking at is this angle right here. This is angle BAC. Now, adjacent to that angle is this angle right here. This is angle CAD. Now notice what these two angles have in common. They have a common side. That would be this right here, side AC. And they also share a common vertex, and that's this point right here. So angle BAC and angle CAD are what we call adjacent angles, and that's because they are on the same plane, have a common vertex, and have one common side, and as you can see, no common interior points. Alright, next we're going to look at vertical angles. And vertical angles are two non-adjacent angles formed by two intersecting lines. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example here. I'm looking for angles that are vertical. In this case, the vertical angles, we would have a pair of vertical angles here along with this here. So these two, angle 1 and angle 2, would be considered vertical angles. They're two non-adjacent angles formed by two intersecting lines. However, we do have another pair of vertical angles. We also have this angle number 3 here and this angle number 4 down here. Angle 3 and angle 4 would be considered vertical angles as well, because those two angles are non-adjacent angles formed by two intersecting lines. So we have two examples of vertical angles here. Alright, next we're going to look at linear pair. A linear pair is when we have two adjacent angles whose non-common side are two rays going in opposite directions. Now notice here we have two adjacent angles. We notice they're adjacent angles because they have a common side and they share a common vertex. So these are two adjacent angles. However, we're looking at the two rays going in opposite directions. Notice how the non-common sides, which would be this side right here and this side right here, notice that those two sides are two rays going in opposite directions. Therefore, we call this a linear pair. Alright, the next thing we have are complementary angles, and complementary angles are the sum of the measure of the two angles is 90 degrees. So you'll notice that I have two angles here. First angle we have is measured 60 degrees. The other angle is measured 30 degrees. Now because I take these two angles right here, 60 degrees plus 30 degrees, notice how they add up to 90 degrees. Therefore we call these complementary angles. So again, complementary angles is when we have the sum of the two angles that measure 90 degrees. Finally, we have the supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are when the sum of the measure of the two angles is 180 degrees. So once again, I have two angles here. One measures 120 degrees, the other measures 60 degrees. If I take that 120, add it together with this 60 degrees over here, notice that 120 degrees plus 60 degrees adds up to 180 degrees. Therefore, we would call these supplementary angles. And that's because they add up to 180 degrees.